This is the story of my journey through ECS 210, a class about the complexity of curriculum. When I started this class, when I thought of curriculum, I thought of a long, boring government document that teachers had to follow. I had a lot to learn. Here's my story. I learned that in the 1900s, normal schools taught teachers a hierarchy of races. The hierarchy went something like this: Anglo-Saxons at the top, then Northern Europeans, then Eastern Europeans, then Orientals, and finally the uncivilized Africans and Indians. I was surprised and frustrated to discover that normal school textbooks said I would be slow to understand and appreciate the high ideals of the Anglo-Saxon civilization because I'm Ukrainian. I couldn't believe teachers were taught to think in these racial terms, and the teachers are often still thinking in racial terms, just in less overt ways. This taught me about how curriculum as place and lived experiences contributes to common sense. I experienced a bump of discomfort when we talked about commonsensical definitions of good students. In the classroom, this often plays out as teachers giving help to the students who look like they will be successful, but not helping the students who really need the help. This was discomforting because it rings true. I know I identify most with students who are like I was in school, and this is problematic because when I was in school, I fit the mold of what a good student is supposed to be. However, as Kumashiro tells us, many students are unable or unwilling to be the kind of students school and society tell them to be. This taught me about how curriculum produces certain types of learners and how oppression can result from who we allow our students to be. Another bump in my journey occurred while reading Heather's Moms Got Married from the New Teacher Book. I became uncomfortable when the little girl in the story announced, "I know who I'm going to marry when I grow up. I'm going to marry Ella." This made me feel like engaging children in discussions about same-sex marriage might encourage children to think about marrying someone of the same sex. I had to ask myself why I was uncomfortable with that, reflected, and realized that I still have the idea that same-sex marriage is not natural or is only for certain people, and definitely not for children. Because I was socialized to believe that being a good little girl meant having crushes on boys, I still have the tendency to think this is natural. However, I must keep questioning my beliefs and challenging myself to think about where my beliefs came from. This taught me about curriculum as narrative and how we can learn so much from stories. My next bump of discomfort was realizing that I didn't address my gender, sexuality, race, or class in my autobiography. This was discomforting because I realized that the way I made sense of my world didn't work. I reflected on this through a blog post where I wrote, "It's hard to recognize how gender, race, class, and sexuality shaped my journey because I've been trained not to see my privilege. We have these regimes of truth or normalized lies ingrained into our common sense, and they obscure the benefits that we gain through privilege." This taught me the importance of recognizing my privilege and understanding how it shapes my identity. My curriculum of self enables me to question the status quo and the dominant story being told. Next, I learned about curriculum as outcome. Most of us agree that standardized testing is not fair because it is culturally biased, because the conditions we give for testing are often not good, because some students just don't test well, and because they cause high levels of anxiety among students. My bump of discomfort came when we were asked what we thought, not about getting rid of standardized testing, but about getting rid of standardized curricula. I was instantly uncomfortable with this, thinking, but how would we know what to teach? And how would we ensure that all students have equal chances? Having no structure is a scary thought, especially in our society where standards equal access. However, we need to think critically about our desire for standardized curriculum and the comfort of having it. This is something I'm still wrestling with. My next bump occurred during our curriculum inquiry projects, when I realized that I didn't know any specific examples of contemporary benefits of treaty, which was the treaty outcome we had chosen. This was frustrating because I had to first learn it for myself before I could plan out how I was going to teach it to the class. I worked really hard to make the connection between our paper-making activity and the treaty outcome we chose, but I tried so hard to connect them that it came out really forced in our presentation. This is a struggle I will continue to face, how to integrate treaty education in a way that is natural and makes sense. This taught me about curriculum as written, planned, and taught. The next part of my journey was an aha moment. One of our speakers asked the question, why do we ask students to separate their lived experiences from the classroom? Teachers do this all the time, as if they need to sanitize the classroom, as if lived experiences are somehow inappropriate for school settings. All students come to the classroom with previous knowledge, the lived curriculum. I learned the importance of connecting students' lived curriculum to the mandated curriculum, to break down the binary into a continuum. I now understand curriculum as place, as productive of certain types of learners, as narrative, as self and complexity, as outcome, as written, planned, and taught, and as lived. My understanding has evolved from a very narrow view to seeing curriculum as everything that happens and doesn't happen inside and outside the classroom. I've taken you through some of the ways this class has challenged my beliefs. The path was a little bumpy, but as Kumashiro tells us, learning should be disarming, disorienting, and looking beyond. I have learned through my discomfort, and because of that, I have grown as a future educator.